Last week, when Ray was preaching for us, he led us in some thoughts about the entry of Jesus into Jerusalem on the Sunday we know as Palm Sunday. And that ministry really last week leads us very closely in terms of its theme into the things that are on my heart to share with us today. For those who were here and may not have quite recalled what Ray said, or for those who are not here and want an update, one of the things that Ray alluded to was the mirror that you see on the passenger side of cars with that curious little sign on it, "Things in this mirror are closer than they appear." And Ray led us in the thought that the King and the coming of the kingdom was far closer than it appeared to those who gathered on that day when Jesus came riding into Jerusalem. And the reason that it was far closer than what it appeared to be was because Jesus did not appear in any way, shape or form to be a king. So the question was not whether they could even, to extend the analogy, perceive that there was an object in a mirror, but more fundamentally to work out what that object was. The question was one of the nearness of the one who really was and really is king, but whose kingship does not appear to look like or act like any of the models of kingship that have ever existed in the world. Now, this morning we've read through John chapter 18 and John chapter 19, and I think it becomes obvious as you read those two chapters together, just in a consistent flow as we have this morning, that one of the central themes of those two chapters is the kingship of Jesus. And the accusations brought to him that he was making himself out to be a king, and the trial and interrogation by Pilate, and Jesus' answer to him, which says, "Yes, I really am." And so by inquisition, Pilate had established the fact that Jesus was indeed the King of the Jews. The kingdom was indeed closer than it appeared to all of those who expected a king to be something other than what he really was. But if you go further afield from John's Gospel, that theme of the kingship of Jesus is reiterated in all of the Gospel accounts of his trial. And one of the places that it comes through most strongly is in the way in which he was treated by the soldiers, as he was mocked, the mocking, all related, all the different things they did and what they said and how they did it, related to the fact that he was a king, and they refused to recognise him as such. So they dressed him as a parody king, some sort of pantomime king, in some cruel, terrible, twisted pantomime of torture, with a crown of thorns on his head and a royal robe covering him, and a reed held in his right hand to be a sceptre. A broken reed he will not break, a bruised reed, burning flax he will not extinguish, a reed as a sceptre in his hand. And then a bowing down, "Hail Jesus, King, King of the Jews." And so at the very heart of the message of Good Friday, as it's preserved in all the Gospels, but very, very obviously here in John, is the fact that what happened on Good Friday was not the killing of an innocent man simply, nor was it simply the political machine who had misunderstood a teacher who in every sense was moral and didn't like what he was saying. At the very core, heart, essence of Good Friday is the killing of a king. It is regicide, not just homicide. And how do you kill a king? Well, the first thing you have to do is to determine in your own heart that he's not a king that you want. And he's not a king worth serving. And in the history of real revolutions against kings and princes and those in authority, you'll see very early on in the rhetoric, it develops a line that says, either this man is not a king because he's usurped the throne, or if he really is a king, he's not the sort of king that we need or we want. Those things emerge as you go through the gospel accounts. This man is not really a king. How could he be a king? When Messiah comes, he's going to do certain things that a king would always do in terms of conquering the enemies and leading us in triumph and establishing his throne and overthrowing the enemies. This man's not really a king because he doesn't look like a king, he doesn't act like a king, he can't be a king. But in fact, as you read the gospel accounts, everything tells us that Jesus is the king. And paradoxically and wonderfully, the paradox of grace is this, that our defiant, hate-filled, spiteful, angry murder of the king, our no to God, we will not have this man rule over us. Our no to God is at the very same time, in that act and in that man and in his body, God's yes to us. You may say no to me. You may murder my son, who is your king, but in that act you have not cancelled out my love. Your no, in all its hate-filled spite, is the manifestation in history of my eternal yes to you, that I will be your God and you will be my people. You can't murder love, finally. And so we need to think about this theme of kingship for a little while. And I'd suggest that it's something of the weight of the fact that we see here the murder of our king that really has to break through to us for the gospel to be gospel. The day of Pentecost, as Peter had preached and they had heard that Jesus had been raised up from the dead and he was a Messiah, they were cut to the heart and they cried out, "Men and brothers, what should we do?" They'd murdered the king. The meaning of Easter, the meaning of Good Friday is bound up in that act. It's not, as I heard someone say in one of the talkback shows this week, well, it doesn't really matter what Easter means so long as it means something to you. Doesn't really matter even if you've come to the point of view that Jesus was a good man and the political system was just harsh. The reality of what has happened on Good Friday has to break in at a deeper level, which only the Spirit can bring. That on that day and in that act, humanity as a whole assembly crucified their rightful king. Now there's three facets to that kingship. I'm going to be very brief this morning with all of us present, all of the children present. And these three facets I'm just going to skip over quickly, but I hope with some sense of justice to them, and they're not mutually exclusive. I don't want you to think that one contradicts the other, one cancels out the other. You have to hold these all together in your mind as the one substance, the one lump, the one nature of kingship. Because Jesus, the man, is Jesus Emmanuel, God with us. And so much of the talk at Easter is about what happened to a good man. And so little in the public media in particular is what happened to our God. "'Tis mystery all," the hymn says that we sang earlier. "'Tis mystery all, the immortal dies." And the first way we need to understand the gospel accounts is that Jesus is presented, proven to be Jesus, King of the Jews. The gospel accounts take us through the fact that he came from David's line, that he was from the tribe of Judah, that he was the one to whom the sceptre would come, and he was finally the one to whom the nations would owe their obedience. And he received the title Son of David with joy. "Son of David, have mercy on me." And you could almost see, as Jesus hears the cry and see a smile in his face, he says, "Yes, that's what I'm here for. The Son of David has come." And as promised Messiah, therefore, as the King of the Jews, to him belonged the obedience not just of the Jewish people who came from Abraham through Isaac and Jacob, but to him belonged the obedience of all the peoples, King of kings and Lord of lords. But when we look at the Old Testament and the Old Testament covenant arrangements in particular with this particular group of people, Israel, in the Old Testament as they were known as God's covenant people, those arrangements with Israel, that choice of Israel, embodied in that one small group of people, sort of a microcosm, if you like, of a cosmic reality. That in the covenant with David, you saw something that pointed beyond Israel. In the covenant with Abraham, you saw something that pointed beyond them. In the covenant with Moses too, if you look at it, it points beyond them. In the worship, in the temple and the tabernacle, it pointed beyond that immediate small group. There's a microcosm, there's something being worked out there in Israel, but is wider than Israel and is greater than the nations. So it comes to this, that if Jesus is the King of the Jews, every way of understanding kingship in Israel finally would lead us back to creation. And the other thing that comes through this is not Jesus, King of the Jews. And they said, "Oh, don't write that. Write, he said he was King of the Jews." Pilate says, "No, what I've written. I've tested and I've tried him and he is. Whether you crucify him or not, that's your responsibility." But besides that title, King of the Jews, Jesus is brought out by Pilate, dressed in the robe, dressed in the crown of thorns. And what does Pilate say? "Behold the man." Because as king, Jesus is the last Adam, the representative man, the man for all men, in all places, in all times, the man in whom the nations are reconciled to God, not just Israel, in whom the sins of the world are taken away. Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, not just dealing with the iniquity of Israel. And if you go back to the Old Testament and you look at the story of creation, the creation of man and his position within the garden and his position over that created order was the position of a king. He is the vice-regent over the creation. But he is not a king in his own right, nor he is a king under his own authority. He is a king who is king because Yahweh is king, the Lord is king, God the Creator is king, and he places Adam on the throne of his creation as the delegated ruler in his image. So in the image of the man, you see God's kingship. In the image of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ, you see the kingship of the Father. And all of those creation statements about the nature of the reign and rule of Adam and the king of creation under God the Father, who is the maker of all things. In Israel, they're brought down to a specific focus, but the specific focus is not just for Israel's sake, it's for the creation's sake, it's for the whole nation's sake. And if we had time, we could trace that through further today, but simply to say this, that Jesus, as the last Adam, represents the whole of humanity, not just Israel. He is King of the Jews, but King of the Jews under all of the covenantal arrangements with Israel, that his identity as the last Adam might be truly revealed and opened up. But the third thing is this, the third facet of the kingship. Neither David, as the exemplar king in Israel, the greatest of the examples of what an earthly king could be, nor Adam before his fall, neither David nor Adam were kings. They were not kings with a capital K. There is only one king with a capital K, and that is God. And all the way through the story of God's dealing with his people, the question is, how would they relate to his kingship? Not just relate to him in some philosophical, metaphysical sense, but how would they relate to his kingship over them? Jesus, King of the Jews. Behold the man, the last Adam, significantly standing under the curse of the thorns and the thistles. But did you pick up in the reading earlier on, as they came to arrest him in the garden? The translation that we heard read, it said, I am he. And they all fell backwards to the ground. But the he is not there. It has to be sort of supplied in English in order to try and make sense of a sentence. But if you were to read it as it stands, he simply said, who do you seek? I am. Before Abraham was born, I am. This is from 1 Samuel chapter 8. The elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. And they said to him, behold, you've grown old. There was ageism in those days too. Your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king over us to judge us like all the other nations. To judge is to deliver. It's not just to act as a circuit court magistrate. To rescue, to save. But the thing was displeasing in the sight of Samuel, rightly enough, when they said, give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed to the Lord, Yahweh, I am the name. And Yahweh said to Samuel, listen to the voice of the people in regard to all that they've said to you. For they've not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. Like all the deeds which they've done since the day I brought them up from Egypt to this day, they have forsaken me and served other gods. We have no king but Caesar. Who was Caesar? Caesar was the great god who ruled over the earth. You could go to a temple and offer a sacrifice and worship Caesar. The judgment on Christians was that they refused to do so. They have forsaken me and served other gods, so they're doing also to you, Samuel. Subtext, now you know how I've had to live for all these years. Now listen to their voice, however, and you shall solemnly warn them, tell them of the procedure of the king, the justice, literally, we could put that in inverted commas. You want a king who's going to rule, you want a king who's going to judge, you want a king who's going to deliver, well, he'll bring a justice. But watch out. So what happened on that day that we now call Good Friday all those years ago was simply a reiteration of what happened in the garden when we in our first parents said, we will have no king over us. And in their desire to be free and to be as God, knowing good and evil, they became enslaved to the God of this age. And we do have all of the nations, a king, the prince of this world, ruling over us. And it's a reiteration of what happened at the time of Samuel's plea to the Lord, that his covenant people, who were to be a microcosm of what God had planned for the creation, in that definitive act, reject God as king over them. It's not just that they've tired of Samuel, but they've tired of the God whom Samuel represents and in whose voice Samuel speaks. And here, all these centuries later, who's there? Jesus, King of the Jews. God is closer than he appears. Behold, man. God is far closer than he appears. Because this Jesus, this last Adam, this man is God in the flesh. Before Abraham was born, I am. Here I am. Your God. Your King, King of creation. And I stand in your midst. Do not fear, Peter. They have rejected me from being king over them. But I'm king over them still. And Peter, I'm king over all of your failures as well. And I'm king over Pilate, because he would have no authority unless it was granted to him. And I'm king over those who crucify me. And I'm king over my own life on the cross, because it's not snatched away from me. But I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up. So I, in a performative utterance of grace, I give up my spirit to God. But wherever I am, and whatever I do, and however you perceive me to be, I am king, and nothing you can do is going to change it. You can mock me, spit on me, crucify me and kill me, but you can't kill love. And I'm the king because I am in my body the embodiment of the being and nature of God who is love. I am not just Jesus the Son of Man. I am the Word become flesh, the Son of God. And so you have a twofold thing revealed here. You have, on the one hand, and this is what I mean about the meaning of Good Friday not breaking through until somehow we see this. On the one hand, you see what lies in the heart of humanity. And I don't know how it is that over these last 100, 200, 150 years in particular, of the bloodiest period of human history, all of these facile commentators can come on our TVs and in our magazines and newspapers and say, just give us enough time, we'll work it out. People are basically good. It's not their fault. What lies within the heart of a human being? What lies within the heart of us? What lies within the heart of the nations that God can come to us? And we prefer Caesar than him. So on the one hand, this act is a revelation of what human sin really is. And on the other hand, It is the revelation of who God really is. Herein is love. Not that we loved God. What an understatement. But that he loved us. Wayne, leading us in devotions last night before our leaders' meeting, was reading from 1 Peter. He said, we all like sheep have gone astray. It's a very gracious comment. Like, how astray did we go? The sheep only killed the shepherd when he came close. And every now and then, somewhere, through some crisis or something, what's in the heart comes out, and you'll hear someone say, I'm so angry with God I could kill him. That, beloved, is in the heart of every single human being. And our response to that is, yeah, it's in my heart too. And moreover, we did kill him. And his response to our no is, yes, come, bring your hatred to me, do your worst, murder me, bring all your sin and pile it upon me. And my word to you at the end of the process is, it is finished. And I'm still your king. And I love you. You say no to me. You kill me in that cross. And you haven't changed a thing. I'm still your God. And you're my people. And you can go away from that unbelieving, and that cross doesn't touch you and it means nothing to you. And a day will come when you look on him who you pierced and you realise you should have repented of your hardness of heart and your hatred of spirit, and you regicide. But beloved, in another sense, you can look on him by faith now whom we've pierced right now, and you can say, that king is pierced by me, but that king is pierced for me. And all of my sinful, wicked hatred, beyond anything that would ever be imaginable in my nice, civilised view of myself, has been taken into his body in that tree, on that cross. And he says to me, it's finished. It is finished. And the resurrection, which we come to rejoice in 2 days' time, on Sunday morning, is the amen and the proof that it is finished, and the King now lives and reigns for us eternally, interceding at God's right hand, judging us, delivering us truly, bringing justice to the ends of the earth, so that all the nations may hear what he's done.